Good afternoon, Venerable Cartson.
Good afternoon. How are you? All right. I'm not sure that you hear me. Let's see. Let's look at the setting. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. That's good. How's it going down in Bendigo?
Well, I've decided that I'm going to sell my house, so sooner rather than later. So I'm hoping to be back sooner rather than later.
Are you selling your house together with your son or just the house?
I'm not quite sure how much of a profit I'd make if I sold my son with it.
Well, you can put his photos up for, half for sale, let the people decide.
Good idea.
Yeah. Anyway, let's start with the Heart Sutra. So is your house at Bendigo town itself or close to the center?
Yeah, no, it's 5 minutes from the city center and 10 minutes away from the Buddhist center.
All right. I might buy it and just leave CI to a better place. All right. So, all right. I prostrated the Arya triple gem, thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling in mass of Vancha mountains in the Rajgira, together with a great community of monks and a great community of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage trainer wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom, shall look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition, factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition of factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element and so on up to including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on up to including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on the dwelling perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear, having completely passed beyond error to reach the aim point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom is the mantra of the great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies suffering should be known as the truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata Om Gate Gate Para Samgate Bodhisoha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised as spoken by the Bhagavan. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and its highest assembly. From the accumulations I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. Right, good afternoon. So that's the last day of this module, which is a very short module, on only 4 weeks. So it seems that, at least for me, time passed on pretty quickly. And also, given that Geshe-la's pace for this module is quite slow and we have the chance to go slowly, it's quite nice to be able to reach maybe deeper in interpreting some of the verses. So if you remember where we started, we completed the 4 powers which are conducive to joyous effort in something that was lingering, let's say, from the previous module. And now we've reached this, I think, verse 47. So we are moving forward in a nice pace. So how many people are there in the Gompa? 3. And 4, including myself. Yeah, and maybe also many Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and other beings that we cannot see. Who knows? Yeah. I mean, certainly they do, if they're Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they did not come to listen to teachings from me. It's more like they bless us with their presence. All right. So what I wanted to do today was to just, again, look at the general structure of what we deal with at the moment, just in order to see how we implement that into our personal practice. I think that sometimes when you look at the outline, it's quite full on. It's very extensive, the outline. So it's sometimes easy to lose our perspective. And particularly when we cover one verse after the next, if we are not really thinking of what is the sequence of argumentation that Shantideva presents here and how it all works together in one package, it's some sense it becomes less powerful. We lose sight. So I thought of, first of all, looking again at how does it apply to us, not only in the context of developing calm abiding. I think that also it's a good structure to keep in mind with any practice that we do. Actually, it's quite weird. You're sitting there and I'm facing this way. So maybe it is weird, isn't it? So, sorry? Yeah, it's like, no, it's pretty weird because, you know, it's like the city is turning this way and then you guys are sitting this way. So I find myself that kind of, anyway. So, so, you know, so it's a sense, so the same thing is also, I'm not looking at you. Yeah, don't take it personally. Now I'm looking at you, but I'm also looking at others. Anyway, so so it's, I think that it's the same structure can apply to any other practices that we do, whether in retreat or also in a loose sense outside of a retreat setting, when we just adopt, I think, a more integrative way of integrating the Buddha's practice of antidoting afflictive states of mind and developing positive states of mind into our everyday reality. So looking at how we isolate ourselves from the hustle and bustle of the world to a certain degree. Of course, if you're a family person, if you have a 9-to-5 job or any other type of job that you do, it's impossible to isolate yourself from all the hustle and bustle of the world. But to a certain degree, we do make our choices with respect to ways of making our life more simple, simplifying some stuff for us. So I think that there's still some of the things that Shantideva says here that we can take on in whatever we do, even if we have a very busy family life, and still find ways of reducing attachment and so forth. So to look at the general structure, it's not, sorry, it's this. To look at the general structure, today we started with abandoning erroneous conceptions, but let's go back. So I think that it's quite difficult to read the text like that, so I'll enlarge it in a second, but we began with abandoning the class of things incongruous with calm abiding. So what is not conducive with calm abiding and single point concentration is mental wandering in general. But also, to be more specific, to be able to attain calm abiding, we need to antidote mental laxity and mental excitation. For us as beginners, the predominant obstacle would be mental excitation or mental wandering. We also need to remedy the tendency of the mind to be vague about the object of meditation, to lose interest, to be sluggish, to be unclear, to be sleepy, and so forth. We also need to remedy that, but by and large, when we look at the first obstacles that we face to a meditation, we're more subject to mental wandering, rumination, excitation, different types of discursive thoughts rather than just becoming sleepy. So first of all, Shantideva says, let's deal with this wandering. In order to curb down on that mental wandering, first of all, we abandon the bustle of the world. So to abandon the bustle of the world means, as I said, when we started to isolate ourselves more from external stimuli, from things that give rise to a sense of attachment and desire. So what Shantideva does here is he says that actually let's look first of all at things that could be external to us, living beings in general, or actually, yeah, living beings in general, but also things like gain and honor. So first of all, let's create some gap, some space from those things which are objects of desire. Once we find a certain situation that works for us in being physically or physically isolated from some form of stimulation that come from those who are dear to our heart, our family members, our friends, our relatives, gain, honor, or any other thing that is happening for us. Once we do create some gap, and we then find some time for solitude, then we also need to then start to address the mind. And I think that for many of us, we find that particularly when you are going into retreat or start to develop a daily meditation practice, you find that all of a sudden the mind becomes more loud, right? Things that you do not recognize on a regular basis, things that occur to us on a regular basis, which go unnoticed under the radar. When you isolate yourself from the hustle and bustle of the world, suddenly they become really amplified in your mind. And sometimes you go completely crazy with that mental amplification of the objects of desire. So here, Shantideva says, let's deal with that amplification of the object of desire. To begin with, it seems that the main thing that Shantideva does, it says that one thing that makes us go crazy when we try to isolate the mind from thoughts, it says it's desire, but it deals with that in a very specific way. It says that actually it's sexual desire. So of course, there are other things that I think excite the mind when you go into retreat, like you start thinking of food. I think that probably happens to most of us, kind of thinking of shopping and what we need to buy for our retreat and what's going to come next week, and then having like this strong desire for sweets or savory or whatever. You know, it becomes really amplified, don't you find it? And then kind of, you know, sometimes also you have suddenly unfinished business with friends and relatives and so forth. You know, I remember that at the beginning of COVID-19, for example, last year, when I was in quarantine, when I returned from New Zealand, I was alone at home for 2 weeks, which were really blissful. And then I stayed for some more time. But it was something kind of unresolved with one of my friends that was playing on my mind. And because I was in self-isolation, it became like a big story. It was actually interesting because I was aware of it becoming a big story and also trying to apply all the antidotes that we learn, which work to a certain degree, but the mental proliferation was still there. You know, the mind was still busy with that and kind of dissecting and analyzing and amplifying the whole situation. So I think that it happens to many of us. So it can be quite pathetic sometimes when you look at it in hindsight. It's like, what the hell was that? Anyway, so yeah, for sure. So Shantideva says in the second section, when it says, let's deal with erroneous conception, it says, after you create a gap with those external things, start to deal with your, I don't want to say mental shit, but start to deal with that. Now I've said that. No, start to deal with kind of sexual desire and desire to other things, because so long as those things become amplified in your mind for that long, you'll find it difficult to really stay focused on in your retreat, be single pointed, and then be able to make your mind really effective in your practice. So as Geshe said today, we also contextualize Shantideva's instructions when we acknowledge that he gave them, first of all, in a monastic environment, which was predominantly a community of male monastics. So the way that he phrases that is addressing male monastics that take up this practice and says, so those are the ways to deal with desire that arises in your mind. So let's look at the main point that he makes in this section. So first of all, abandoning the bustle of the world. So we've spoke a lot about it. So it speaks about abandoning attachment to sentient beings. So it's not sexual desire here. It's more like, I think, just general attachment to the people that are close to your hearts, your parents, your siblings, your partner, your children, and so forth. It's not emphasizing their sexuality rather than just being attached to other people. Then it also speaks of abandoning attachment to gain and honor. And then it goes into the benefits of relying on isolation. We mentioned those preconditions that are good for physical isolation in terms of the companionship that you keep, the place, livelihood, having your provisions or necessities accessible to you, having lesser desire, being more content, giving up many activities, giving up thoughts of desire, and so forth. So these are included in the benefits on relying on isolation. And once you create the physical distance or physical gap, then abandoning erroneous conceptions mainly deals with cultivating weariness, the weariness of desire, because it seems that to begin with, when you're in retreat, it seems that rather than hostility predominating, it would be attachment that predominates. And attachment, as Geshe said today, has many different shapes and forms. First of all, there are many objects of attachment. And here, what I wanted to do was also to mention the different terms that are used in Tibetan language in order to speak of attachment, because the at least 4 terms that I was thinking of during the lunch break that come up quite often in teachings. And in English also, we use sometimes different terms. So it's good sometimes to just be aware of all the terms that are used in the Buddhist terminology to address attachment in order to understand, I guess, the different flavors and textures of attachment. So first of all, the first word that is used is döba, which means wanting something, wishing for something. So it is often equated with the affliction of attachment, right? You wish for something, you want something, but not all wishing or wanting are necessarily afflicted, because we want to become Buddhas. We wish to attain a state of liberation. We want to emerge from samsara, to live samsara. So these are not afflictive states of mind. In general, they are factually concordant consciousness. They are caught with reality. But specifically when we speak about the afflictions, then often desire or wishing for something is regarded as an affliction from the point of view of emphasizing or superimposing, exaggerating the qualities of a particular object and thereby seeking it. So that's durba, the word for desire in Tibetan. The second word is chakpa, which is, you can say that in some sense it's synonymous with attachment, chakpa. Chakpa has, when the word is used in Tibetan, not only it has the connotation of wanting or desiring something, but also it has the connotation of having a passion for something, right? So you feel passion. You're being attracted to something. You become greedy about it. You become lustful about it. So it seems that you wish for something, but it has that strong sense of drawing you towards that object. So yeah, attraction. So sometimes those words are used in an interchangeable way. Then when often when we speak about the afflictions, durba and chakpa put together to a word that is called durchak, which is the common term for attachment. So you have not only a desire, but also the one in which kind of you're strongly attracted to something. And often it is said that it is like a attachment is like a drop of oil that seeps into a cloth that makes it really difficult for it to be removed. So similarly, when a mind is drawn towards an object, it's so difficult to detach the mind from that object, to break that connection. So attachment is like that. So that durchak, the word durchak. Then a word that Geshe-la was using, chakpa, chapta, chakpa. C-H-A-K-P-A, chakpa. I'll write it here. How is it different too? So we have durba, which is desire, chakpa, which is to be attracted to something with desire, and then durchak is putting the two together. So it's not it's not very different. It's just kind of. Sorry? Then there's another term, the fourth one, which is the one that Geshe-la was using today, which is Durnam, Dongam, actually, not Durnam, Dongam. So Dongam consists of two syllables, durba or de, and ngamba, which makes it really strong. So the way that Geshe-la was using today is not just desire, but you have this hunger or thirst for something. You wish for something, but with that strong clinging to it. So that's Durnam. And now I thought about a fifth word, Shemba, which is the word that we use for clinging. So clinging is also, you can say, it's also something that I think that it highlights another aspect of attachment in which kind of you cling to something and it's difficult for you to, it's difficult for the mind to be separated from the object of attachment. So it's not that those words are different. I mean, they are different, of course, but it's not that the meaning of this word is completely different. It's like, I think, highlighting different aspects of the affliction of desires attachment that occurs at different levels, different degrees, different strength and extents. So Shantideva in this point in the text says, let's deal with that. Let's deal with cultivating weariness for desire. That's the first point that he makes. And then at the end, there would be 3 verses to deal with cultivating joy for isolation. So once you also develop weariness of desire, then you can really take joy in being carefree. Now, carefree when I use the word carefree, it's like, I think that sometimes it's really useful to try to visualize a mind being free from a sense of desire. How it'd be like, for example, not to be controlled by desire, to really be free to do what needs to be done, right? So when you sit in meditation, not having any thought of desire arising in your mind, not anything that arises, nothing in your mind that tells you that next year you have to finish your practice because then you need to make enough money or to go overseas for holidays or whatever, or that you kind of need to get into relationship because you might be getting too old for a relationship or what have you. No desire such that tell you that you need to get those things because it will make you happy in this life. It will make you complete in this life without desire whatsoever. That would be a really liberating state of mind. So when we cultivate joy in isolation, it's cultivating joy in finding not only physical isolation but mainly from mentally isolating ourselves from attachment. So is it like renunciation? Terry is asking. I think that it is a crucial step for developing renunciation, because when you look at Lama Tsongkhapa's 3 principal aspects of the path, where he speaks about the measure for having developed renunciation, he says when there is no attraction whatsoever that arises in your mind to the pleasures of samsara. So that's one feature. But then on top of that, it says, and day and night, the mind seeking liberation arises. This is when you have developed renunciation. So when you have no attachment to any pleasure in cyclic existence, but also when you strive for liberation, this is when you develop renunciation. So are you asking, Ruby, do you need it also for doing an effective practice of prostrations and yungness and so many prostrations and yungness, or would it be more of an outcome of this practice? Does it need to be before, or is it? Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, so also kind of recognizing that we have no control over the aggregates at the moment. We're under the control of our karma and affliction. So, as we're doing this practice, and we're trying to assume control over the contaminated, appropriated aggregate, and to purify the contaminated, appropriated aggregate. So, I think that when we look at our spiritual practices, often they say that you need to have enough merit in order to engage with those practices to begin with. So it's like, it's like a chicken and egg, you need enough merit to do nyungness and prostrations and so forth, but also, yeah. Yeah, Chuck is saying that you need to have enough merit to go into retreat and enough merit to stay in retreat. So I think that altogether, you need to have a lesser degree of attachment to your body, possessions, resources, and so forth in order to engage with those practices. I mean, particularly when you think of nyungness, how hard it is physically, and also I think mentally. So you need to, at some point, decide that you're not going to submit to your attachment, and you'll be able to develop patience and perseverance in dealing with the physical and mental difficulties, and definitely joyous effort in doing that. Thank you very much. but then also I think that as you do nyungness or prostration, so such practices which require a lot of perseverance and joyous effort, you also find that actually they're helping you to reduce a sense of attachment. So it's required before, it's required in the middle, and an outcome of that would also be, I think, a reduction of that. I remember that when I was, before arriving in Australia, 15 or 16 years ago, I was hanging out in Taiwan with my teacher, and I was very kind of with a light attitude. I said, why don't you just give me instructions on the preliminary practices, and I'll kind of arrive in Australia and start doing the preliminary practices, doing like 100,000 prostrations and Vajrasattvas and so forth. So he gladly gave me those instructions, and I came to the center and I studied them, and I thought myself, oh my God, what have I gotten into? It was really, it was really hard. It's like, what the hell was I thinking? So it turned out, sorry? Yeah. So, you know, it's, I think that now when I think about it, I mean, to do something like that, of course, you need to have summer to begin with. Otherwise, it's hard to undertake those practices with a sense, with just wanting to do them. And also to be able to bear with difficulties when they arise in order to complete the practice and to do it consistently. But then at some point, you know, when I was doing it for the first time, it turned out to be a practice of just doing the numbers. Now, so I was doing 100,000 prostrations, 100,000 mandala offerings, 100,000 Bodhisattva, but my mind was not really into it in a proper way. It was, no, I was new here. I was working really hard. I didn't have the, I think, the knowledge and the depth, and also the conviction in the Dharma like I have now. So it was, at the end, it turned out to be a practice of doing the numbers, and it also had me to kind of be fit and also to be slim. So, you know, I had like a few other benefits in that practice. But I think that when you do that, you also accumulate merit to do it next time around and to do it better, to build up on your practice. So, you know, so when I did it again later on, I think, you know, my attitude was much better, but also not just because I've done prostrations before, but also all the other things that joined in. Yeah, yeah. So you kind of, you need merit before, you need to have lesser attachment, but also as you do the practice, hopefully it continues to reduce your attachment. And the end result is, I think, the same, having a lesser type of attachment. So it's altogether, through and through, it's work in progress. So, so in cultivating weariness of desire, there are three main points: reflecting on how the effects of honing one's desire involves fear. It came up yesterday in discussion. Yeah. Yeah, what's the connection between attachment and fear? I think that kind of the sorry, fear of the unwholesome variety. I think that there's also there could be different types of fear. You know, I think that there are ones that are very easy to connect. You know, attachment and fear. It's like, for example, you know, what would happen if I go into retreat and when I come out, I'll have no friends. Yeah, my family will have died, and I will not see them ever again. I will have depleted all my resources or many of my resources in this life, and since I haven't accumulated any new resources, what will happen to me later on? So there could be those types of fear that come because of attachment, but they could also be kind of smaller types of attachment, like, for example, those things
So
that
Yaki,
mind when you do retreat. What will happen if I'm not going to have the veggies that I like next week? No, what if the shopping is not done properly?
hello,
Yeah,
hello. So can I say something? Am I allowed to say something?
yeah. Don't hold back.
So attachment and fear, so it seems to me what you were just the examples that you gave then, that fear is an exaggeration of is an exaggeration of a projection of something that may happen or may not happen.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that probably fear could be in general things that we do regard as fear, something that is scary. Like, for example, what happens if I go into retreat and I'm not going to see the people that I love anymore? What if they pass away while I'm in retreat? So we have that kind of fear. But also the word for fear in Tibetan sometimes has, one of the words that is used for fear is having that sense of anxiety. So it doesn't necessarily have to be fear of something that is really tangible. No, it could be just like, fear in terms of like, what if I'm not going to get the food that I like? No, it's not that kind of you terrified. It's not that kind of your mind is completely gripped with fear, but it's the thing of like, what if I'm not going to get what I want? Or what if that situation rolls in? How am I going to cope with that? So it's funny, like in English, I think that we're not going to describe kind of the thought of what if I'm not going to get the food that I like next week. We're not necessarily going to call it fear or anxiety, but it's still something that plays on our mind. All right, we might call it anxiety, but not necessarily fear. Yeah, so altogether, Dechanat, kind of the fear of what will happen, of what might not happen. A sense of small doom easily generalizes. Yeah, I'm just going to waste my time. Yeah, definitely having expectations that, within doing a month retreat, 3 months retreat, or even a year retreat, there would be massive transformation that will occur. I mean, if it happens, that's great, but in all likelihood, there might be small transformations, but sometimes we set ourselves up to disappointment. All right. I mean, to prevent such disappointment from arising, we really need to know what we're doing in retreat, to have a plan. If you're just going to think that, oh yeah, I'm going into retreat and I'm going to meditate, probably it's not a good plan. Yeah, it's not a plan. Have procedures and also expectations. Easier said than done. Then, so reflecting on how the effects of honing one's desires involves fear. So this is quite interesting because first, I've been looking at the other commentary, the Nectar of Manjushri's speech, and verse 38 is not found in the section of abandoning erroneous conceptions. It is actually, it belongs to the previous section. So it's a different way of explaining the text, and I think that it works quite well when you think that instruction on exerting effort in virtue. Let's look at verse 38. It says, having given up all other thoughts with only one thought in me, I shall strive in order to set my mind in equipoise and in order to subdue it. So this, you can say that this section belongs this verse belongs to the section of in isolating your mind from erroneous conceptions, or you can also say that it concludes a section of cultivating physical isolation. So if you think that it belongs to the section of cultivating physical isolation, you have decided to go into retreat. You have made some mental notes about what you need to curb down. You need to reduce attachment to your friends, relatives, and so forth, and also attachment to gain and honor. Then you think that once I do that, I go into retreat. Then when you go into retreat, as Shantideva says, having given up all other thoughts of desire to friends, gain, honor, and so forth, with only one thought in me, I shall strive in order to set my mind in equipoise. And as we said, in equipoise, in order to cultivate loving kindness and compassion, bodhicitta, and wisdom. So I shall strive in order to set my mind in equipoise and in order to subdue it. The mind is subdued with wisdom that realizes emptiness. And I need also all the other things, calm abiding and special insight, in order to subdue my mind. So you can say that this, you can take the position that this belongs to the previous section or that it belongs to this section, but the main verse that deals with developing fear of attachment is both in this world and the next, in verse 39. Desires give rise to great misfortune, establishing in this one, killing, bondage, and flaying, and hells and the like in the next. So Khenpo Kunpen says in his commentary, on page 270, it says, in this and other world, other lives, in other words, in this and future lives, desire for lovers, for possessions, and so on, is the fertile parent of all suffering. On account of a woman or material gain. So again, this commentary is speaking to, I think, mainly to male monastics. So on account of lovers, possessions, and so on, it is a fertile ground for all suffering. On account of a woman or material gain, or a man may be killed by others, imprisoned and bound with iron chains, his limbs wounded and cut with swords. As the saying goes, joyful though the act may be, the price is paid in tears. This will end in tears, as we say. Paid, in other words, in the next life, in the experience of the boundless pains of the hell realms and the states of pretas and animals. So these are this is the first point in developing, reflecting on how the effects of honing one's desire involves fear. And then Shantideva goes into, that's what I wanted. And then we have the point of reflecting on the unclean nature of the body and so forth. And then reflecting on how desire produces all sorts of unwanted consequences. So when I was thinking of this section at home, I was wondering, when we look at what Shantideva does here, reflecting on the disadvantages by considering what one finds in cemeteries, reflecting on the aspects of those who are still alive. It seems that the main thing that he does is he speaks about the faults of the body, how the body is unattractive. When you think of what will happen to the body after you die, also when you think of the body in general when you're still alive, how when you think of the bones and the flesh and so forth, what goes through your intestines, when you think of the sexual organs and other orifices in the body, Shantideva says that the nature is actually very unattractive. So I am wondering if here Shantideva is mainly speaking about the faults of the body, do you think that it's only dealing with sexual desire, or can you find another person's body appealing without sexual desire? I mean, like, for example, when you think of your, could you just as well say that you find, sorry, yes, could you give an example of like finding someone's body beautiful without calling it sexual desire, or being attracted, being attracted to someone's physical aspect without having sexual desire? Anyone that you see around? I mean, I was wondering, like, for example, with your, so easily attractive best friends, those who use physicality for art. No, or like, no, Mm. Mm. Yeah. So I'll just summarize what you say. I try to summarize what you say for the people at home. Um, um, so, you know, you said that sometimes also in the Dhamma it is emphasized that when you see someone as attractive or beautiful and so forth, you might be more receptive to what they say. So it's not necessarily sexual desire or physical attraction. You might find someone's appearance to be appealing, and therefore mentally you will gravitate more towards that person. But here I think that when Shantideva speaks about it, and also when Shantideva speaks about it here, he speaks about how we how we put a stop to desire towards the body. So I just brought up this question just in order to think of whether it's actually meaning, whether Shantideva only deals with sexual attraction or maybe just also attachment to the body of other persons in general. Mm. Yeah, so whether it is sexual or not, here Shantideva's main point is to speak about how we arrest the tendency of the mind to go to objects of desire and thereby hinder our concentration. Attractiveness is a cultural construction. In some cultures, they like fat people or people with very long neck. Yeah. With a V long neck, sorry. Very long neck or V long neck. Anyway, in order to arrest sexual desire, we think of the unclean nature of the body. And the third main point that Shantideva mentions in this section is how, because of that sexual desire or just desire in general to the body of another person, you experience many unwanted consequences, basically the consequences of karma and afflictions. So just looking at the, sorry? Uncontrolled. Yeah, kind of when your attachment is unchecked, it is not controlled, then and you act upon that, then you experience unwanted consequences in this and future lives. So just looking briefly at the points that we haven't covered yet, but just what Shantideva mentions here. It says that you will not get what you want. You will have no opportunity for enjoying what you wish for, what you desire. And you will become exhausted and thereby incapable of enjoying what you desire. And due to the object's intermittence, it is difficult to come upon the objects that you desire. Sometimes it is there or not there. And then due to being controlled by others, you might receive many unwanted consequences, and so on and so forth. Then it is connected to the fault of numerous unwanted consequences, lacking independence, being under the control of others. It acts to hinder liberation and so forth. These are the unwanted consequences of desire. So we use, it seems that here, the reflection on desire in 3 points. First of all, fearing unwanted consequences of desire. Then investigating the object of our desire and seeing that actually it is unattractive rather than attractive. And then thinking of how we don't get what we want, we actually get what we don't want because of desire's attachment. So this is the general structure just Shantideva follows. Then it says, I wanted to touch just on one more point. I think that what we've covered today in class is quite clear. So yeah, so I wanted to begin with.
Sorry, Yaki, before you go on,
Yeah.
could you just what was feeling unwanted consequences of desire? What was the second one?
Fearing unwanted consequences of desire. It has, let's see. First of all, not obtaining what you actually desire, but also it is connected to the fault of numerous unwanted consequences. So you don't get what you want, actually you get what you do not want. You get what you do not want in terms of you lack independence and you quickly throw away your life. You're being under the control of others and constantly besieged by various sufferings. Then your desire acts to hinder liberation and it puts to waste leisures and endowments. Because of desire, you develop the mind that strives. When you understand that, you develop the mind that strives for liberation and by reflect on the disadvantages of desire. And you reflect on how attachment to desires is the source of all disadvantages. That's the second part. So what I wanted just to look at briefly is the section. So today we started with reflecting on the unclean nature of the body and so forth. We spoke of reflecting on the disadvantages by considering what one finds in cemeteries, right? What happens to the body after we die. So I think that the things that we've covered today were really clear. So I wasn't planning to go over all the verses, but one thing that I found in Khenpo Kumpen's explanation, I thought it was a nice point in relation to verses 40 to 42. So there are no effect of acting to experience the corpse. It's quite a, the translation is being very literal. I think that if you try to word it in a more flowing way that might not be so strict as it is in Tibetan, you say that actually when you desire to have to come in contact with another person's body, think about what happens to that body when it decays in the cemetery. Will it give you the desired result? There is no result from the wish to experience or to come into contact with something that actually is like a corpse. So yes, okay, it says, even though this instructions is directed to monastics, it's really helpful as lay people. Yeah. Yeah, these pressures loom large most days. So it says, for their sake, many requests are first made through male and female messengers, right? So here Shantideva is speaking, but I guess from the perspective of traditional India, where many of the marriages were matchmaking, right? So messengers were sent to the family, sending messages back and forth. And even when the future bride and groom were to meet, they did it under strict supervision of the family, probably not allowing them private time to be alone and so forth. So for the sake of securing such a connection, such a relationship, many requests are first made through male and female messengers. Negativities and notoriety too are not shunned for their sake, right? So creating false pretense to, as we said, to claim positive qualities and try to hide one's fault. And you even engage in fearful deeds for them and will even exhaust your wealth, right? Probably that might be a reference to dowry. You greatly enjoy completely embracing them. If they're nothing other than skeletons, rather than being so desirous and completely obsessed towards that which neither is in your control nor belongs to you, why do you not go to the state beyond sorrow? So altogether, I think that these 3 verses are clear. The additional thing that Kempo Kumpel added to that was, since that he says that you can understand the 3rd line in verse 42 that says, towards that which is neither under your control nor belongs to you, you can understand it on 2 levels. And I'm paraphrasing what he says. You can understand it on an ultimate level, but also on a conventional level. On an ultimate level, you understand that in that from the perspective of what you find in cemeteries. So there's quite a lot of effort and work that is going into establishing a relationship. And as Shantideva says, some of it is based on false projection that we put out in order to attract another person. So we accumulate negativities on that for that end. And at the end, when we think of the nature of the body becoming a corpse, for what end do we work so much and create all those negative actions? So it says actually, when you try to find the attractive thing in that person, and you then check at a body that is lying around and try to find the attractive thing within that corpse, you might look at the flesh and the bones and the skin and so forth. So that is related to an ultimate analysis, where actually you're looking for the attractive person that you're trying to find, and you find no attractiveness in the basis of designation. So the basis of designation is the body. We impute a person on that person, not only a person, but also an attractive person, right? So if you think now of someone that you find really beautiful, someone that you find really physically attractive, so we impute that attractiveness as if it exists in and of itself, independently or objectively, in that person. We fail to see that it is our mind that sees that person as attractive. We think that the attractiveness is completely there objectively. So then Shantideva says, actually, from the point of view of ultimate analysis, when you think of what you find in cemetery, you'll not be able to find any attractiveness in that corpse when it is lying in a cemetery. And as Geshe said today, the difference between our body and a corpse is just in terms of whether it is together with consciousness or not together with consciousness. Of course, if a corpse is lying at a cemetery for a long time, it will start to decay. So it's not exactly like our body now, but from the point of view of the makeup of the body, you can say that it's still the same. So that's from the viewpoint of ultimate analysis, in saying that there's nothing attractive in that body. Now, from the point of view of the relative, as Shantideva says here in the 3rd line, towards that which neither is under your control nor belongs to you. So we have an attraction where we desire something that actually is not in our control. The body belongs to another person. So if we think of desiring something, had it been under your control, had it belonged to you, that would be one thing. But actually it doesn't belong to you. I think that we can think about it with respect to a corpse or to the body of another person, and think of how it would be like to desire another person, and then start to think of how would a body like if they were to lie in a cemetery or a chanting ground. But just as well, I think that we can think of how we have this possessive attitude with respect to our body. But then at the end of our life, our body will be cast aside, will be discarded in a cemetery, or will be cremated and so forth. So it actually doesn't belong to me, because it will be discarded. It doesn't belong to me inherently or forever. It is something that will be discarded, and I will continue on. So then when I think about it, if had I known who I was in my previous life, and then I would be able to locate some of the remainings. In no way I would have a thought of that belongs to me that will arise in my mind. It would be quite awkward. So think of, for example, visiting a cemetery here in your locality and kind of coming across the grave of John Doe. It's not like you're going to think that, even if you knew that that was your past life, you wouldn't be attached to the skeleton of that person in thinking that that belonged to me, and therefore no one is allowed to do with that grave as they wish. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's good to kind of, it's good also to give it a lot of time to think about it, to go through that process in order to acquaint the mind with it, to think about it again and again, and also to try to imagine a situation where you actually release that sense of attachment. Because if we, I think that sometimes if we just think of the disadvantages without trying to emulate the result of that, in which we relinquish that sense of attachment, it lacks a certain power. At least I found, at least for me, that also trying to visualize how it'd be like to then relinquish that sense of attachment and feel free from attachment, and how the mind becomes more open and spacious, that becomes much more powerful. All right, let's leave it here for now. So we have a couple of weeks break. We have a Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga retreat, which will also be online. So if you want to, those of you who are far away and cannot join us, you're still welcome to hop on the Zoom bandwagon and attend some of those sessions online. What else? I will send some review questions from this week in the next few days. Also, we should have a test, I think, an exam. So I will also send a few questions. And you have probably 2 weeks to do it, so just take it easy, but not too easy. Sorry? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carson.
You have 2 weeks to rid yourself of attachment. Thank you.
I might see you next week.
2 weeks without
attachment. Coming up on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So Yaki, before you go,
Yeah.
what was that fourth Tibetan term? There was Durma, Chakpa, Durchak, and what was the final one, please?
I'll write it here. It's not dot, but Durnam. Durnam. I mean, that's the pronunciation. The way that it is spelled is something like that. That's the right spelling, and the pronunciation is Durnam.
Okay, thanks everyone.
All right, thank you. Let's do some dedication.
Okay.
Yeah. Due to this virtue, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha. May all transmigratory beings without exception to that state. May the precious Supreme Bodhisattva not just rise,
may that rise, but increase more and more.
In this land encircled by snowy mountains, you the source of all happiness and good, our fortune, death of peace, relatives, samsara ends. You uphold the subduer's mirror way, who says in the bountiful prayer of all, sustaining, preserving, spreading into nothing Horus doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers, honoring the three jewels, protecting of myself and others, your disciples. Please live long. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're not going to test us on Tibetan spelling, are you?
Sorry?
You're not going to test us on Tibetan spelling, are you?
I'm going to test you.
I hope not.
But feel free to fail. You know, I'm not gonna hold you as a bad person if you don't get it right. All right.